All right, what it do, citizens of Ptown, with the last fight of 2023, Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington, taking place last week. I got to go back, take a look at the year and all the fights that happened, and now we have the first video on my three end of the year lists, and that starts with the best UFC fights of 2023. 2023 was my first year, my first full year covering the UFC, and so overall, it's been a pretty good year. I would have to say that there are definitely a decent amount of lows, a decent amount of okay cards, but there are still some great moments and still a lot of great fights. So yeah, this video is going to be me covering my favorites across 2023, and of course, as always, this is just my opinion. This is not the best fights of 2023. This is my personal list of the best UFC fights of 2023. If you don't see your favorite fights on here, either I didn't watch it because I just so happened to not watch every single fight that the UFC put out because there's a lot of events and can't watch them all, or it's just not my favorite in the top 10. So leave your top 10 fights of 2023 down below. Let me know the order. Let me know your favorite fights, who showed up this year, who didn't, all your favorite moments, and all of that. And with that said, before we get into the list, we're going to start off with some honorable mentions. The first honorable mention is Amanda Hebos versus Luana Pinheiro on the um, Paul Allen. Wait, no, fuck. Brendan Allen versus Paul Craig fight night. Pretty good stuff. More recent. Then another honorable mention is Nazim Sadikov versus Vyacheslav Borshev. Ooh. During UFC 295. And then last but not least, we have Max Holloway versus the Korean Zombie. Last year, I said that Luke Rockhold had the best retirement fight a fighter could have when losing, and I take that back. Luke Rockhold had a great send off, but I think most of us can agree that the Korean Zombie also had one of, if not the best send offs that a retiring UFC fighter can have while still losing the fight. Other honorable mentions to bring up is Robbie Lawler's retirement this year, alongside both Zach Cummings and Ed Herman's fight early this year too. So great retirement fights. Let's get into the top 10. Number 10 might be a little surprise to some people. I'm going with Macy Barber versus Amanda Hebos during the Emmett versus Topuria fight night. And just to say really quickly, once again, there are more than 10 great fights this year, just because, the other fights that I mentioned, as well as fights I didn't mention, just because they didn't make the top 10 doesn't mean that they weren't great fights. I would probably consider Macy Barber versus Amanda Hebos in the number 10 spot. I would describe this fight as kind of like a lightning in a bottle. Amanda Hebos had a lot of great output early on, and Macy Barber has fucking hands, dude. She has heavy ass hands, and it was some really entertaining violence for as long as it lasted. No gaps. It didn't overstay its welcome. No gaps in between the action. It was just all action, no breaks, and ended quickly. No complaints. And I think as a result, we got one of the hardest MMA photos of 2023, or at the very least, one of the hardest photos to come out of the UFC in 2023, right here with a Macy Barber, uh, you know, covered in her own blood. Pretty good fight. Not much else to say. Once again, not the only great fight, not the only one worthy of the top 10, but probably what I would pick. All right, number 9, we have CJ Vergara versus Daniel Da Silva from the Sanhagen versus Vera fight night. This is probably my pick for the goofiest fight of 2023. At the very least, the goofiest fight in this top 10. I mean, if you've seen it, you know what happened. It's just so goofy, dude. I mean, Vergara gets knocked down 3 times in the first round, twice with a head kick, 2 solid head kicks, and then he proceeds to run a mile in the octagon while getting 10-8'd. Right? He does like 5 or so laps around the octagon trying to run away from Daniel Da Silva, and then he still pulls off the finish in the next round. And the goofiest part about all of that, about, for someone to be fighting at the top level, one of the most competitive high level divisions in the UFC, which is, supposed to be the pinnacle of MMA, right? Despite running around for most of that first round when he wasn't being knocked down, just he still pulled off the win because De Silva likely gassed out while chasing Vergara. Like, that is so funny and so goofy. Like, you could not imagine that happening at something that's supposed to be the high level that is the UFC, but really entertaining. Um, I think it was like the second fight of the night for that fight card, and it was the fight of the night. Absolutely chaotic, absolutely goofy, pretty memorable, great fight. That is my number 9th pick. And number 7th is a very recent one, probably the most yeah, the most recent fight of the night, and that is none other than Irene Aldana versus Carol Rosa from UFC 296. This fight makes a lot of strong cases for top lists. I mean, it's women's fight of the year, arguably the best fight since, or the best women's fight since Joanna Young Jacek versus Zhang Weili 1. It had one of the best comebacks of 2023 with Irene Aldana. It's arguably the big surprise of this year and of this list, because not only was it a big surprise that this fight was awesome, but Aldana was also surprisingly the biggest dog of the UFC 296 card, as well as one of the biggest dogs on this overall top 10 list. So, once again, a lot of cases, a lot of top cases that this fight can make. I mean, this fight was just, I don't need to explain too much because it was the most recent. Out of all the fights on this list, I mean, incredible heart and toughness from both fighters, and of course, everybody's favorite aspect with how Aldana just ignored the damage that she took from the leg kicks from Hossa, and just outdogged her. Just totally outdogged her. 85 unchecked leg kicks, I think. It was definitely at least 80. And she just ignores it. You know, she initially reacts from the leg kicks, kind of moves a little bit. And she's like, okay, moving on. I'm just going to outdog you. And you could see the damage on both these women's faces. Absolutely awesome fight. One of the biggest surprises of 2023. It is my personal number 8. Number 7. Moving on to number 7, and that is Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Curtis from UFC 287. This fight has aged very well to my surprise. I don't remember what I said about the fight initially. I definitely said it deserved to be fight of the night. I did not expect it to land, in the top 7 of this year. And I think this is just a great example of a fight coming together perfectly. I mean, both Kelvin Gastelum and Chris Curtis have similar builds, similar height, similar fighting style, and despite being low in the rankings, this resulted in a pretty high-level striking fight. Lots of output from both fighters. Kelvin Gastelum and Chris Curtis seemed to just land at will. Whatever they threw just seemed to land. And with the power that both these fighters have, it just made every single bomb be heard loud and clear. This fight was like constant car crashes, is how I would describe it. I mean, little slowdown, if at all, and both fighters made great adjustments. Notably, Chris Curtis in the second round throwing shots to the body, and that definitely pulled him ahead. And yeah, just back and forth, constant adjustments, constant output, great striking, little slowdown. And of course, it also caps off on a perfect note, too. At the end of the third round, both boys were just swinging a lot. And that's just how you end a fight. And it was a great way to cap off a consistently awesome fight that aged surprisingly better than I thought it would. All right, moving on to my number. What number are we at? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Number 6 is also a huge surprise of the year, and that is Jared Cannonier versus Martin Vettori. I was very surprised about this fight. I had plans on this Saturday, and I wasn't really too sad about missing it. But then after hearing about it later and going back and watching it, instead of being a point fest like I thought it was going to be, because Martin Vettori, decision machine, Jared Cannonier, also not the most entertaining past 2 fights at least. It was actually a display of great cardio, heart, and toughness from both fighters. I mean, it was already impressive enough to see Jared Cannonier landing shots that could kill me, right? And enough shots that broke middleweight records. But it was also more impressive how Marvin Vettori took all of these shots without even getting knocked down, okay? And he was still keeping up with the output of Jared Cannonier. I mean, lots of respect to both fighters. I mean, here's one thing that this fight convinced me that earned me a lot of respect for Marvin Vettori. I could hit Vettori on the chin with a sledgehammer and he wouldn't go down. I'm confident at that now. With Jared Cannonier being a former heavyweight, with all that power and landing so much on Vettori, and Vettori not even stumbling, or not stumbling, not even getting knocked down. What could I do with this? Even with the sledgehammer, what could I do for Martin Vettori? And that is a very scary thought. Respect to both these fighters. Incredible 5-round fight. All right, moving on to um, the top 5. Did I get the math right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Yes, top 5. Sorry, man. I ever since I finished college, math has taken a back seat. Top 5. We're in the top 5 of 2023. What fight is this? A fight that aged surprisingly better than I thought it would. Number 5 is Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. Excuse me, Rafael Fiziev. He's not Brazilian. From UFC 286, this is actually the least surprising fight to appear on this list. I think we all knew when this match was made that it would be a great fight, and maybe I was initially disappointed that it wasn't 5 rounds. After going back and rewatching that fight multiple times, I'm extremely satisfied with what we got because it featured high level strikers paired with great power, accompanied with both fighters having a love of violence. I mean, it was just excellent matchmaking that, just came together perfectly. I mean, it was extremely close too and competitive with both fighters constantly adjusting to each other. And once again, we combined all those factors. It resulted in a fight that aged a lot better than I expected. Worthy enough of a top five. Maybe didn't get 5 rounds like we wanted or like it should have gotten, but once again, not disappointed at all. This is an excellent fight that has been really effortless to rewatch since for a long time, and yeah, makes the top five of 2023. All right. Number four. What is number four? Number four, you probably were waiting for this fight. This was a front runner for Fight of the Year for a long time, and it is my current number four of 2023, and that is none other than Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Geoff Neal from UFC 285. So I personally consider this the first great fight of 2023, and like many people, I agreed that it was the Fight of the Year front runner for a while. It featured an impressive performance from both fighters. I don't remember giving Geoff Neal much credit, and I did underrate him coming to this fight. Um, and he, alongside Shavkat, put up an impressive performance. I mean, Neal got super busy on the feet during the fight, landing bombs of Shavkat in between stuffing all of Shavkat's takedown attempts. And then Shavkat showed great toughness taking those bombs and landing his own shots on Geoff Neal. And he even lost his mouthpiece at one point. It was still taking heavy shots and still trudged on, which was, extremely impressive. I mean, great war, incredible war. And of course, the fight accumulates and ends with a creative submission finish from Shavkat, and it was just a great way to cap off what was already a consistently great battle. Incredible. At first, you could say that Shavkat's aura of invincibility was taken away as Geoff Neal kind of humanized him because Rakhmonov's head movement was critiqued and he was just getting lit up on the feet. But with the finish and how Shavkat adjusted, it still established him as a huge threat in the welterweight division. And of course, his win against Wonderboy has continued to do that. People are looking at Shavkat to be a champion by the end of 2024. And I'm looking forward to seeing if that comes true. So yeah, that's my number four. So, number three, what could be better than one of the front runners of Fight of the Year? And this might be a surprise to you. I haven't mentioned this throughout the year, but my number three favorite fight of the year is an incredible fight, a big surprise, one of the lowest ranking fights on the list, another prelim fight. That's Jose Mariscal versus Trevor Peek during the Emmett versus Taporia fight night. The second appearance from that fight night, from the fight night card on this list. Um, God, this fight is incredible. It's incredible, and it's aged so well. After going back and rewatching all these fights, it's aged so well in my opinion. If I could describe this fight in just a couple of words, I would describe it as beautiful violence, or as kind of a way to maybe visualize it, if this fight is if a tornado met a hurricane. Now, hear me out. Hear me out real quick. All right. Um, think of Trevor Peek like a tornado. All right. He windmills his punches and he swings them with so much range of motion and tries to take out everything in its path like a hurricane. Okay, because the way that Trevor Peek swings, he just swings so sloppily but so wildly, as if he's trying to take off someone's head while also trying to swat as many flies as possible with each strike. And then Chipe is like a hurricane because a hurricane has walls, right? The walls is where the storm is. It's where it's the most dangerous. I would compare Chipe's I would compare like the walls of a hurricane to Chipe's stronger defense, alongside a hurricane having the eye of the storm, right? The hurricane having an eye, and that eye would kind of be like Chipe's ability to stay calm within a fight, remain composed, and use his higher IQ. So I mean, how this fight really just turned out was Trevor Peek tried to turn into a street fight, just charging and throwing shots, you know, loaded from downtown. And then what was just so awesome about this fight is that Chipe beautifully stood his ground. Okay, he used his superior defense, his superior head movement, and overall better fundamentals to stay ahead of Peek in the fight, such as countering Trevor Peek, not letting his strikes go unpunished. All right, if Chibi couldn't, Chibi would either avoid the shots with superior composed head movement, and if he did get hit, he would always punish Trevor Peek, not let him go unpunished and counter, as well as mixing things up and shooting and landing takedowns. Okay, with the way that Trevor Peek swings, all right, he loses a lot of balance, and Chico is just like, okay, you're gonna swing at me, I'm gonna dodge this with my superior head movement. I'm gonna counter and I'm gonna shoot for takedowns. It was just a beautiful, well-rounded game from Chipe Mariscal, and what was the best part was that Chipe didn't avoid the war. He did not avoid the war. He stood his ground. He's like, I'm gonna make this so technical. I'm gonna out technical you, if that's even a word, but I'm not gonna run the fight. I'm not going to run from the war. I'm not going to turn this into a point battle. I'm going to stay in the street fight and just out street fight you while being more technical. This fight is fantastic. I think it deserved fight of the night on that fight card, in my opinion. And it has aged so well, in my opinion, of course. It's a potential all timer for me. And the only reason why it's number three is because we just so happen to have what I consider two all timers in the number two and number one spots from 2023. My number two fight, my runner up fight of the year, is none other than Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Moreno 2 officially in UFC 290. The third fight overall between both these fighters needs no need for explanation. We all agreed that this was an incredible fight, a potential all-timer, one of, if not the best fight of the year. It was just two fighters at a championship level, bringing everything to a fight. I mean, this fight had wild, chaotic moments. It was very high, it had high-level striking with counters and trading, while also just wild moments of these two swinging and hurt each other back and forth and changing the tides, as well as great grappling. There was aggressive grappling from Pantoja and takedowns. Brandon Moreno with the amazing scrambles, high output, lots of activity from both fighters, and it was just a wall-to-wall amazing war. I mean, flyweight does not disappoint. Flyweight has yet to disappoint me, especially at the championship level. Just so much appreciation for this division, and this fight was absolutely incredible. And once again, I don't need to explain why this fight is incredible. Now, maybe I would need to explain why it's not my number one, because this is, often considered the best fight of 2023, and this would be my number one of this year if my 2023 fight of the year didn't happen two fights before this one. My number one fight of the year is Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner, man. Man. UFC 290 was probably my fight card of the year because we had two of the top two best fights of the year. Man, it could be argued that other fights in my top 10 right here could age better than this one, such as Pantoja versus Moreno 2, Trevor Peek versus Chipe Mariscal, even Shavkat versus Geoff Neal. Those fights make an argument to age better. However, in the case of choosing my favorite fights between, the higher level fights versus, you have your high level fights and then you have the fights that have the more chaotic moments. Sometimes you could pick one or the other. It depends because no two fights are exactly the same. In this case, for my fight of the year, I pick the fight with the the greater moments, the more chaotic moments, and that is none other than this fight right here. I mean, and as far as the best moments or having the best moments of the year, you just had to be there as a Dan Hooker fan to understand why I'm putting this at my number one. I mean, Dan Hooker had my personal comeback of the year. We had some great comebacks, but this is my personal favorite. I mean, to watch Dan Hooker get pieced up in the first round, to somehow eating that solid head kick in the second, to then witnessing him come back and nearly finish Turner in the same round. Potential round of the year. The third round was also potential round of the year. I mean, Turner tried to punish Hooker for, the early round, piecing him up. And then but Hooker just keeps moving forward and just out dogging Turner with now his recently bleached blonded hair stained with his own blood and then just coming back. It was incredible. I mean, this established Dan Hooker as one of the biggest BMFs in the UFC if he already hasn't been already. And yeah, my personal fight of the year, there you have it. That's my top 10 fights. Yeah, go ahead and let me know your favorite fights down below. This will be the first of multiple videos kind of going over my top lists of 2023. And just to kind of throw them out there, some of my favorite events of 2023. UFC 290 was probably my card of the year. UFC 284 was excellent. UFC 295 and 296 were pretty good, if not great. Fight nights, got to do Emmett versus Topuria. I think Luque versus Dos Anjos, that fight night was really great, as well as Jan versus Dvalishvili. UFC 288 and UFC 291, I think, were all great fight nights and fight cards. And yeah, so that does it. Go ahead and let me know your top fights down below, your favorite fights, your top 10 lists. Which order would you give it? And yes, thank you for a great year of UFC. Let's look forward to another great one, huh? 2024. Let's see how that goes. And yes, I'll catch you for the next end of the year list video coming soon.